Hi, I'm Chris Vandersluis. I'm the president of HMS Software. Thanks for joining us in this webcast today. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about how to choose timesheets. This is something that I'm presented with as a question and as a challenge on a regular basis. And you would think that, well, how can that be a problem? How is it possible that it's hard to choose timesheets? After all, there are many of them, aren't there? And that's right, there are. Timesheets come in a lot of different formulas as part of the problem. When people say, go find me a timesheet, and you go look for them, there are literally hundreds of thousands of hits on a search engine. How is it possible that hundreds or thousands of possible products, possible commercial systems, could even survive in that market? And what makes it so hard to choose a timesheet? Well, the fundamental problem is that they're not all designed to do the same thing. Yes, they're all designed to collect time. Sure, that's true. But where the front part of the timesheet may look the same, entering the time may look like a grid on almost all timesheets, what happens after the timesheet is created is going to be very, very different. And therein lies a potential problem for many organizations. So for the next few minutes, let's just take a look at the different possible kinds of timesheets you may have been called upon to look for, and what you may already have in your own organization. And these might include things like time and attendance, the HR timesheet, the same payroll timesheet or a separate payroll timesheet, security access systems, something for time and billing, maybe time and motion in a manufacturing business, or maybe you need timesheets to be able to validate or audit your R&D tax credit, or something for the U.S. Defense Contract Audit Agency, or maybe a project statusing timesheet. There are so many different kinds of timesheets, and each one may seem at first to be the same, but they're very different. Let's take a look at a few of these types. And I'm going to start with time and attendance because it's the most popular kind of timesheet, just in terms of how many are there, or what percentage of timesheets are in a time and attendance kind of mode. So time and attendance are typically designed to say, when was an employee working? When did they come to work? When did they leave work? Or when did they sign into work? When did they sign out? And if they weren't at work, what kind of time would we account for? Are they away on sick leave? Are they away on vacation? Is this time we have to pay for or not? So there's a lot of things. In that, and almost every payroll system will have some associated timesheet to it. This will almost always be a time and attendance system designed for the payroll. And so, what do we need for that? Well, we need who's the employee. Maybe that's an employee identification number or employee name. What is the period of time in which we're reporting? Is it over 2 weeks? Is it for today? Is it for this month? Is it for a week? Were you in the office, out of the office, working away from the office? You were absent maybe for a specific reason. That'll be of particular interest for payroll in terms of, do I pay you? But also of particular interest to human resources because we're tracking how much vacation time you've taken versus how much you've earned. And so all of that becomes a time and attendance kind of conversation. You can see already we have a lot of questions from payroll in terms of, how will that work for us? How will we make that work? And every company that has to track time, whether it's for salaried staff or wage staff, have to track whether they came to work or not. Second most popular type would be time and billing. We see this from most professionals, whether it's a lawyer, an accountant, an engineer, somebody who is going to bill for their time has to know what time was spent on what client. And so we want to be able to summarize that data into an invoice at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of whatever period we're collecting for. And so time and billing, also very specific. And what do we need? Well, we need a client ID. We perhaps need an employee ID, probably an employee ID or a group of resources to say who was doing the work. And then how much time. That may not be down to the minute, may not be down to the hour. Often we look at 1/4 hour blocks. And so we see people billing that time then against a client's account. We might not have a name of a project, but we need enough of a description to say, what was this for? Is this for the Acme project? Is this for the, for general time? Is this for for paperwork. What is this time being billed for? We need enough information to be able to justify the invoice. If the client comes back and says, I'm not really happy with this list of time, what did you do for that time? And that's usually the only thing that we get to. You'll note that I don't have here the exact day that we did the work. I don't have any indication of whether somebody was in the office or out of the office. And so this does not look like what we just saw for for payroll or for HR. So already we have two different flavors of time that don't exactly match up to what each one needs. If I shift to project statusing, project updating, we see this with every project scheduling system. If it's particularly the centralized or service scheduling systems, if it's a project management system, it's probably got some timesheet associated to it. And what do we need? Well, now I need a list of the tasks and the list of the assignments so that I can see what each person did for the tasks that they were assigned. And what management is interested in here is, did we advance these tasks? Have they moved forward? Are they complete? Are they still outstanding? And what kind of time is left to complete that? And so this can be very different from what we saw in payroll and what we saw in human resources and what we saw in billing. Project statusing now isn't even interested in how much time you spent at the office, only in how much time you spent working on the project. So a project manager may look and say, yeah, so interesting that somebody was absent last week, but not really to me. You might say, well, this person was absent for 4 days last week. Apparently there's no excuse for their absence. And a project manager's answer might well be, sure, but during the 8 hours that they did they work on my task? Because that's what's of interest. If I look at other systems that are required, external governance can drive that. We've already got 3 different categories, 3 different flavors of time, and even for project statusing, we can end up with more than one timesheet if more than one project scheduling system is in use. Someone might say, well, we're using Microsoft Project, and they have a timesheet in Project Online. And another department might say, well, we're not using Microsoft Project, we're using Jira. And it has a way to update the work that I spent on different tasks. And so now I have multiple possible solutions. External forces, like from the government, can drive more solutions. If I'm doing something like R&D tax credits or Sarbanes-Oxley compliance, or we're doing work for the U.S. Defense Department or the U.S. Department of Energy, I can be required to follow some of their auditing standards. And each of them may be a little bit different. These types of standards are often similar in that they want to know not just how much time was spent, but who spent the time, which employee spent the time, and some things about them. That may include things like where was that employee based? Is that employee a citizen of a certain country or a legal resident of a certain country? And was the work performed there? And what tasks were done with that work that would qualify for the particular program we're talking about? For an R&D tax credit, for example, we might very much want to know whether that is an R&D eligible task and was the work performed inside this tax jurisdiction. And so some of those things are similar, but each one has unique requirements. And so the metadata, the extra data that's attached to an employee or to a task can be important in being able to categorize that data. But listen, we're not done. There can be other systems, security access systems, for example. You use biometrics to swipe a card or to use a retina scan or a fingerprint scan or a hand scan to come into a building and to leave a building. And what does that track? Well, the employee ID, if we're using biometrics, we know that was them. What time of day and what was the reader number? That's the only data we get. We then have to infer to go, oh, well, that reader number is an inbound reader. That means they were arriving. And this reader here is an outbound reader. That means they were exiting. And from there, we can start to build a list of time that somebody was on site or in the building. That doesn't mean they were doing work on a particular project. It doesn't even really mean they were doing work, just that they were present. And we know that these people have gotten access because their access was approved at the scanner. Time and motion is maybe one of the oldest types of timesheets, because we see that in the very beginnings of manufacturing, where we say we're going to clock down to the second how long it takes for a particular piece of assembly work to be done. And this is often done using laser scanners or magnetic code readers. And we may say, well, what was the station number? What time did the scan happen? Who was the employee ID signed in at that station? And so now I start to go based on the timestamp. How long did it take for each piece of work, and how long was that person at that station? And then there is just a plethora of other possible timesheets, and we have seen all kinds of manual-based timesheets. You would think in this day and age there wouldn't be too many of these left. You would be incorrect. There are thousands and thousands of companies that have not yet changed from a manual timesheet, or one step up from say an Excel-based timesheet or a spreadsheet-based timesheet that arrives in many different files to be able to figure out where people put their time. And so what happens? We have now many different kinds of timesheets. You can see if you're somebody looking to select a timesheet, you've already got quite a lot of choices in front of you. And so what do companies do? How do they get through this? And the most common story is they get through it by having a whole lot of timesheets. I mean, that's not anyone's intent. No one wakes up and goes, I've got a great idea. Let's just buy as many timesheets as we want. No, nobody really wants to do that. But we find out that the project people have picked a project-based timesheet. The HR people have got their own HR timesheet for vacations. I've got something for billing. I've got something for payroll. These may be the same. They're more likely separate. I've now got something from maybe a cost control system to be able to manage my contractors. Something else for the access cards to make sure the right people come into the building. I've got something in Excel which is totally manual and really doesn't align with any of these. And I've got them all running at the same time. No one sets up this idea. But it happens. It happens department by department, system by system, and requirement by requirement. We end up with all of these different disparate systems that don't align with each other. They don't reconcile against each other, and they're not even checked by each other. But in a worst case scenario, some employees are filling in 2, 3, 4, 5 timesheets in a week. And the system then goes, well, if I need the R&D numbers, here they are. But then the R&D people, if you have an audit, comes back and says, well, that timesheet doesn't actually match your payroll. How do you reconcile that? And well, you don't. And so now you have the IT cost of managing multiple systems or multiple services, the administrative cost of trying to manage multiple services, and timesheets that don't match up one to the other. The cost of this can add up in a hurry. First of all, there's the basic cost of how many different services are you paying for. I mean, that's pretty easy to understand. The cost of trying to reconcile, say, a billing timesheet against your payroll timesheet can be enormous. Enormous amounts of time spent on, well, we billed this amount, but we only paid this amount, and that doesn't seem to make sense. We need to reconcile that. We need to do an internal audit or a report. The cost for individuals of trying to add more timesheets, of supervisors trying to supervise more than one kind of timesheet, and just trying to the time just spent updating these multiple systems can be enormous. And then, of course, there's the IT cost of either maintaining it internally, or even doing the administration and maintenance of a SaaS, of an online service type of timesheet, adds up. Adding up all of these kinds of systems can just cost an enormous amount. And there's also something for to be said for the management time that's spent when people look at two different kinds of reports that in theory you would think should add up to the same thing and simply don't. And management say, we hear this ourselves in our business, they go, why does this one not match that one? And so the amount of churn spent on management looking at these two reports, their end result is often, I don't trust either of these. I now want some system that tells me one version of this truth. So how do you reconcile that? How do you pull all that together? Our position has been since the mid-1990s that really the answer to this is to have a multi-function timesheet. A timesheet that would be designed to do more than one of these processes at the same time. Yes, it might look the same up front, but one system in the middle that would be able to answer whether it's HR or payroll or finance or billing or project management. I mean, whatever the systems are, where in the background it can have robust functionality, it can be complex, but in the foreground for the end user, it's still simple. When you do that, and our product Time Control was designed to do that in the early 90s. It was released in 1994 as a commercial system, but our experience with this challenge goes back to when our company was founded in '84. So for the last several decades, we've faced this one challenge, and this has been the answer that has worked each time that we've looked at it. The key to this is to make the approvals work and to have the information that I need in the background so that anyone who needs to can do the approvals, so that I can get project managers to validate the data one way. I can have scheduling systems feed the data into tasks and assignments and other kinds of codes. I then do a timesheet entry. I can have automated validation rules that say what makes for a valid timesheet. I can have other approval rules, including line item approval, to make sure that the account managers and the HR managers and the billing managers can check that kind of thing. Basic automated rules can do some of those checks to say, well, you can't put in that paid vacation. You don't have enough paid vacation to take that time. So you'll have to ask for unpaid vacation or do something else, whatever your rules are. And then that goes out to all the different other systems, whether that's billing, whether that's payroll, whether it's your ERP for other things, into other kinds of systems. This function, this cycle, this works. And we've been making it work for lots and lots of people. And so, whether it's AMD or CAE or Volvo or the other kinds of companies that have used time control for many, many years, this cycle of doing matrix approvals and being able to have multiple functions out of the same entry makes the difference. So that's the webcast. If you'd like more information on time control, we invite you to stop by the website. You can try it for free. There's a free trial right on the site. Or give us a call or connect with us via email at info@hms.ca. Thanks very much for taking the time to listen to us today, and good luck in your timesheet search.